Hello everyone. Today our group will be presenting on Canada's advantage in maple syrup production. My name is Jackson Caetano and I'm joined by Cheyenne Morasu, Tessina Alina Clement, and Senan Cruz. In this presentation, we'll be exploring how Canada, especially the province of Quebec, has developed both an absolute and comparative advantage in maple syrup production. We'll take a closer look at the natural and economic factors that allow Canada to lead the global maple syrup industry, including its resources, climate, and specialized techniques. We'll also explain how these advantages translate into a strong position in international trade and how they support Canada's role as the top exporter of this iconic product. On this slide, we're highlighting how Canada has an absolute advantage in maple syrup production. This means that Canada can produce more syrup than any other country using the same amount of resources. The eastern provinces, especially Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick, have perfect conditions for maple syrup with dense sugar maple forests and ideal weather. According to the Federation of Quebec maple syrup producers, Quebec alone makes over 70% of the world's maple syrup. That's way ahead of the US, where Vermont, the top producing state, only accounts for about 7%. Canada's advantage comes from both natural resources and advanced tapping systems, allowing for high volume production at lower costs. So this slide shows how Canada has an absolute advantage by producing more maple syrup per unit of input compared to other countries.
Now we will be discussing Canada's comparative advantage in maple syrup production. Quebec, Canada is responsible for about 90% of Canada's maple syrup production, and they have invested in modern facilities that lower the opportunity cost by improving production efficiency. This solidifies Canada's comparative advantage. Other countries could produce maple syrup, but they would be sacrificing resources that could be used for more profitable industries. For example, France and Germany could try producing maple syrup, but their climate conditions are not ideal and they would have to divert land and labor from more efficient industries such as wine or automobile manufacturing. Canada already has the perfect natural conditions and established infrastructure for producing maple syrup, so its opportunity cost is lower than any other country. This is why Canada specializes in maple syrup production and exports it to other countries that lack the natural resources and expertise. This is a prime example of comparative advantage in global trade. On this slide, we will be comparing the global maple syrup production by country. The graphs pictured on the slide show Canada's unquestionable and unparalleled dominance in the production of maple syrup. When comparing the numbers in production, in 2023, the United States produced under 4 million kilograms of maple syrup, compared to Canada's production of over 48 million kilograms. This disparity is due to Canada's specialized infrastructure and climate, which allows for a greater extent of sap harvesting and processing than its rivals. Canada accounts for the majority of the globe's maple syrup exports because it is affordable and has production economies. This highlights how comparative and absolute advantages stimulate international trade, with Canada selling syrup to countries that lack efficient production capabilities.
Now moving on to the key elements that contribute to high maple syrup production. On the slide here, you see a map illustrating the prime temperature zones for maple syrup production. And if you notice, the concentration in eastern Canada and northeastern United States is not just about the presence of maple trees within that area, it's about a very specific climate that Canada has over the United States. And the cyclical pattern of warm days and freezing nights during the early spring is crucial for the pressure buildup and release of sap within the sugar maple. And the black dots you see on that slide represent the general locations of maple syrup producers or sugar bushes and their alignment with these ideal temperature zones, which underscore the vital role of climate. And this favorable climate in regions like eastern Canada allows for highly efficient and economical syrup production, a condition not easily replicated elsewhere without significant investment. And on this next slide here, it shows a short video showcasing the complete maple syrup production process, from the initial tapping of the trees to the final bottling of the syrup bottle. This visual aid highlights why Canada is the foremost producer. The video details the effective methods employed in sap collection, the careful bottling process that concentrates the sugar content, and the quality control measures during bottling. And this established infrastructure and accumulated expertise, combined with the natural advantage of the ideal climate, provides Canada with a considerable edge in the global market. And consequently, countries lacking these natural and operational advantages often find it more efficient in their economy to import their maple syrup from Canada, which fosters a system of international trade based on specialization. All in all, these two slides emphasize the critical interplay between specific climate conditions and well developed production processes in the realm of maple syrup, ultimately explaining why Canada is such a prominent place in the global supply of maple syrup.
Canada's leading position in global maple syrup production provides a strong example of how geographic, climatic, and economic factors contribute to both absolute and comparative advantage. Canada's absolute advantage in maple syrup stems primarily from its natural endowment of sugar maple forests and ideal environmental conditions found especially in Quebec, Ontario, and New Brunswick. These factors allow it to produce maple syrup at greater quantities and with greater efficiency than any other country. However, it is Canada's comparative advantage that truly reinforces its global role. While other countries could attempt maple syrup production, they would do so at significantly higher opportunity costs, often diverting resources from more profitable or strategic industries. In contrast, Canada can focus on maple syrup production with relatively minimal trade-offs, allowing it to specialize and contribute more efficiently to the international market. This specialization, combined with long-standing industry practices and advanced processing infrastructure, allows Canada to maintain quality and scale. As a result, it continues to supply over 70% of the world's maple syrup and remains the dominant exporter in the global market. What this example illustrates is not just Canada's strength in one product, but a broader lesson in economic strategy. When nations focus on goods they can produce more efficiently than others, everyone benefits. Maple syrup, in this case, becomes more than just a cultural symbol. It serves as a practical model of how specialization and trade support economic growth and international cooperation. In summary, Canada's maple syrup industry reflects the real-world application of economic theory, highlighting the importance of understanding where advantage lies and how it can be used effectively in a global context.